Number 9. Lugging the engine. You think you sound cool chugging your V-twin in 6th gear at 35 miles an hour. I get it. That low potato lope is part of the whole identity. But all I hear when I'm standing in the bay listening to that is your lower end rod bearings begging for the sweet release of death. Here's the physics. And it's simple. Your oil pump is mechanically driven off the crankshaft. Low RPM means the pump is barely turning. That means your oil pressure at the big end rod bearings is borderline. Now put full throttle load on those bearings at that exact moment and you have maximum combustion force smashing down on a bearing journal that has minimum oil film protecting it. That's called boundary lubrication. In the real world, it's called bearing wear you can't undo. Recreational power sports shops see this constantly. Cruiser owners who ride 45 to 55 miles per hour in the highest gear they own, barely touching the throttle, wondering why their bottom end sounds hollow at 60,000 miles. It's not a mystery. You violated the fundamental equation that keeps hydrodynamic bearings alive. RPM times viscosity divided by load. Run that calculation at lugging conditions and you lose the oil film. Every single time. Downshift. That's it. That's the fix. The bike has gears for a reason. Number 8. The cold engine redline. 41% of all engine wear happens in the first 30 seconds after a cold start. That's not a guess. That's what tribology research has shown for decades. And there's always some guy at the morning meet who fires up his bike and immediately blips the throttle to the moon because he thinks it sounds impressive. What's actually happening? When your bike sits overnight, the oil drains back down to the pan. The oil galleries throughout the top end, the camshafts, the valve stems, the piston rings, they're running on whatever thin film was left clinging to the metal. When you instantly rev that cold engine hard, you have metal-to-metal contact at the camshaft lobes before the pump has even had a chance to push oil up there. You're shaving microscopic metal particles off surfaces that cost hundreds of dollars to replace. Those shavings go straight into your oil. They circulate, they score other things. Ride gently for the first 2 or 3 miles. Let the oil get warm. Let the clearances tighten up. It takes almost no effort, and it adds real life to your top end. Number 7. Resting your foot on the rear brake. A single ounce of pedal pressure. That's all it takes. Most riders who do this don't even know they're doing it. It's a comfort habit, a balance reflex. The foot just rides the pedal on the highway or sitting in traffic. But 1 ounce of pressure is enough to drag the pad against the rotor, and you do that for 100 miles, then 200 miles. The pad glazes over. It becomes smooth and hard, like a hockey puck. And then on the day you actually need to scrub speed fast, you've got a fraction of the braking power you think you have. It gets worse. Sustained drag builds heat in the rotor. That heat warps the disc, which is now a $50 to $200 part depending on your bike. But the really dangerous part is what happens to your brake fluid. Brake fluid is hygroscopic. It pulls moisture out of the air over time. Enough heat from dragging pads, and that moisture in your fluid starts to boil. You get a vapor bubble in the line. The lever goes soft. You grab it hard, and it goes to the bar. Keep your right foot flat. It costs you nothing. Number 6. Dumping the clutch on downshifts. This one destroys parts you can't even see. When you kick down a gear and just let the clutch snap out without rev matching the throttle, the rear wheel is spinning at one speed and the engine is spinning at a dramatically lower speed. The drivetrain has to resolve that difference instantly. On a chain drive bike, that shock load goes through the chain, through the sprocket teeth, and into the transmission dogs simultaneously. Chain stretch that should take 10,000 miles happens in 10,000 bad downshifts. Sprocket teeth that should wear gradually start to hook, getting sharp and pointed. The transmission dogs, the little lugs that lock gears in place, they take repeated impact loads they were never designed for. Rev matching is not a racetrack skill. It's basic mechanical courtesy to your own equipment. Blip the throttle slightly on the downshift, let the RPMs rise to meet the gear, and release the clutch smoothly. Your drivetrain will thank you by not leaving you stranded. Number 5. The high-pressure power wash. I know the bike is covered in bugs and you want it clean in 10 minutes. I understand. But pointing a 2000 PS eye wand directly at your wheel bearings and swing arm pivot is one of the most expensive shortcuts you will ever take, and the damage won't show up for weeks. That's what makes it so insidious. Motorcycles are designed to be water resistant. Rain, puddles, riding through a mild splash, that's all fine. They are not designed to withstand the kind of pressure that will strip paint off concrete. That jet of water will push directly past the rubber lip seals on your wheel bearings, into the swing arm needle bearings, into every electrical connector it can find. The water sits there. You ride home, put the bike away, and think nothing of it. A month later, you're wobbling down the highway because your rear wheel bearing has started to rust from the inside. Use a garden hose. Use a soft brush. It takes 15 more minutes, and it's the difference between a clean bike and a wrecked bearing race. Number 4. Ignoring the ethanol problem. If you think that's bad, wait until you hear this one. Because this mistake happens every single winter across the country, completely silently, while the bike sits in the garage. Standard US pump gas is E10, 10% ethanol. In some areas now, E15 is showing up at the pump, 15%. The EPA actually prohibits E15 from being used in motorcycles. The labels say it right on the pump. People ignore it. Here's what ethanol does when fuel sits. Ethanol is hygroscopic, which means it actively absorbs moisture from the atmosphere. In a vented fuel tank sitting for 90 days or more, the ethanol absorbs enough water that the mixture can no longer hold together. The water and ethanol drop out of solution and sink to the bottom of the tank. That separated layer is now a corrosive, water-rich sludge sitting directly on the floor of your steel tank. It rusts the tank from the inside out, a process you can't see until you pull the petcock and find orange flakes. Then that rust travels through the fuel pump, through the lines, into the carb or injectors. A $3 bottle of fuel stabilizer added at the end of the season before storage. That's the answer. Stable, Startron, whatever you prefer. Use it. Number 3. Holding the clutch at long stoplights. This is a small one. The damage is slow. But it adds up over years and it costs you a bearing you almost never think about. When you sit at a 3-minute red light holding the clutch lever to the bar, you are putting continuous load on the clutch throwout bearing, also called the release bearing. That bearing is designed to handle the brief, repeated load of a clutch engagement and disengagement. It is a small component. It was not engineered for sustained static pressure, sitting there grinding away for 3 minutes straight while you watch the light. Put it in neutral, drop the lever. Give the mechanism a rest. That's literally all there is to say. Just put it in neutral. A chain is not allowed to be a check later item, but for a staggering number of riders, that's exactly how it gets treated. And I've seen the aftermath. A properly adjusted motorcycle chain should have about 1 inch of free play, maybe 1.25 inches depending on the bike's spec. When it goes past that and starts slapping the swing arm on acceleration, you are now in the damage zone. The first thing to go is the rubber cush drive in the rear hub. That's the set of rubber cushion blocks inside the wheel that absorbs drivetrain shock. A loose chain transfers massive jerk and spike loads directly into that hub, and the rubber tears. Replacing the cush drive is a few $100s in parts and labor. Leave it longer, and the sprockets start to wear asymmetrically. The teeth hook over and get pointed, what we call ninja star sprockets. Now you have a chain skipping under load. Now you have a chain that can jump the sprocket entirely. A chain that fully derails and wraps around the output sprocket at speed can crack the engine case in half. I have seen it. It is not a dramatic exaggeration. It is a trash can full of broken aluminum and a bike that will never run again. Clean it every 500 miles. Lube it. Check the tension. It takes 20 minutes. Number 1. Overloading the stator with cheap Amazon electronics. And yes, I know half of you have already done exactly this. A motorcycle charging system is not a car alternator. A car alternator is a massive, externally regulated unit capable of producing 120 amps or more. Your motorcycle has a stator, a set of copper windings built into the engine cases, producing somewhere between 200 and 500 watts of AC power on most older bikes before it gets converted to DC. That stator output is fixed. It does not scale up because you decided to hardwire heated grips, a heated vest controller, a GPS unit, and a set of LED fog lights directly to your battery. Let's do the math, because the math is brutal. Heated grips, roughly 25 to 50 watts. A heated vest on a medium setting, 45 to 75 watts. A pair of 40-watt fog lights, a GPS and phone charger. Another 20 watts. You're looking at a legitimate 175 to 225 watts of accessories on a bike whose stator might be putting out 280 watts total, while also trying to charge your battery and run the ignition. The stator tries to keep up. It runs hotter than it was designed to run. The resin coating on the copper windings breaks down from the heat. The windings short. And then one day the bike starts but won't charge and you're pushing it to my shop. A stator replacement on a typical V-twin runs between $300 and $600 in parts, and that's before labor. The fix: use a good ammeter or voltmeter to measure your actual electrical load before hardwiring anything. Add a secondary battery or a dedicated accessory relay kit if you need the extra draw. Or buy accessories from a company that actually specs them for your bike's charging system, rather than grabbing whatever's cheapest on a 2-day delivery. A $20 set of fog lights does not have to cost you $500. Unless you do it wrong. Alright, 9 habits. 9 ways riders with 20 years of experience still find ways to quietly shorten the life of their machines. If you recognized yourself in any of these, do me a favor and hit subscribe. Because we put out this kind of real mechanical information every week, and I'd rather you learn it here than figure it out after paying my labor rate. See you next time.